Oh, wow. Well, we're in deep water there, aren't we? uh, again, if people are interested, I gave an hour-long talk to Ralston College on this topic. But effectively, we come to this idea that was known to many cultures, including the pre-Platonic and particularly pre-Aristotelian Greek culture, and certainly to Indian and Chinese and Japanese culture, that things and their opposites coincide. And this, and of course, it was importantly brought back into our culture by Jung, I think a very underrated thinker about the human condition. But it is important because, as I say, I think we misunderstand many things by having a simplistic, linear idea that things and their opposites are as far apart as they can get. And if we move away from something and keep on going, we'll get further and further away from what we're avoiding. Oddly enough, like Alice and Through the Looking Glass, we'll find ourselves confronting exactly the thing we were walking away from because opposites concur. In other words, things are not linear, but they are not either circular exactly, but spiral shaped. In other words, you don't come back, as T.S. Eliot said, to the place where you start and know it for the first time. You come back to a place on the spiral slightly above it, and you can look down on it and you can see its connection with where you are now. And perhaps through that, you can understand what it was you didn't see before. But I like the image of the spiral because if you think of a spiral, if you look right down it, it has this circular motion to it. If you look along the length of it, it has a wave-like motion. And I won't go into quite why those two kinds of motion are so important, but I have a whole chapter on flow, which is central to my ontology. In the book. And of course, I do discuss, although I'm not a physicist, what we can glean from physics on these matters. I have, I might say, a team of what I call tame physicists who came out of the woodwork and wrote to me and said, your thesis is fascinating from our point of view. And so when I'm going to say something about physics, I always run it past them again, tell me I've completely got this wrong, but so I do test it out in that way. I think the question about the relationships coming before relata is an equally amazingly important concept. If I may just speak about it for a couple of minutes, which is almost impossible to do, but let me try. As I say, I think you can only know what you call a part by seeing the relationships in which it stands, and that everything that we see as a part is also a whole at another level. So you are always looking at nested wholes. You're not looking at anything that is just a fragment. There is no such thing, because everything that exists only in relation to everything else. So the net exists prior to the elements in the net that we look at and say, oh, there's something. It's a crossing point in the net. I like very much an image from the Vedic tradition, the Indian philosophical tradition,
Yes.
called Indra's net, of a net that is cast over the cosmos. And in that net, at every crossing point, there is a jewel. And in that jewel, every other jewel in the net is reflected. I think that actually is a very helpful and beautiful image. I think this idea of relations being the most important thing also comes into two other chapters, which I can only hint at these now. Otherwise, we'll not have time for Q&A. But one is that I believe that ultimately, and I have another very long chapter on this. It's a short book length on matter and consciousness and their relationship. And spoiler alert, I believe that consciousness is an ontological primitive. In other words, it doesn't arise from anything else. It is actually a primary constituent. And I'm not saying it necessarily is prior to matter, because I hold that matter is a different phase of consciousness, in the same way that ice is a different phase from water, and steam is a different phase from water, and they have quite different qualities. One of them flows, one of them is solid, one of them is invisible. What is all this? Can they be the same? Well, they can actually. And I see matter as the element in consciousness that provides necessary resistance, coming back to the idea of opposites creating one another, and a degree of permanence that is greater than simply an idea on its own. And it also connects. So consciousness, what is consciousness? Consciousness is always a relation. It's directed towards something. There must be, up in this process, more than one element, even if those elements can be subsumed in the same thing at a higher level. So in my consciousness, there is me and there is something I'm conscious of. My consciousness is always disposed towards something. That doesn't